It's not just I go into a studio and work with a producer that got a bunch of beats that I pick from. I moved past, and I'm hoping everyone else I come across will move past it too.
Everyone knows Bruno Mars as a global superstar, but at 39, he's about to shatter the image you have of him. What's he revealing that has the entire industry talking? From his gambling addiction to a dark family secret, the truth behind his rise to fame is far more complicated than you ever imagined. Bruno Mars, the name that's synonymous with chart-topping hits, Grammy Awards, and unforgettable live performances. He's the guy who made you believe that funk, soul, and pop could coexist effortlessly. With hits like Just the Way You Are, Grenade, and Uptown Funk, Bruno Mars has become a household name. His smooth vocals, iconic style, and charisma on stage have made him the perfect pop star for a generation. But there's a side to Bruno Mars that most of us don't see. The side that's hidden behind the bright lights, the flashing cameras, and the stadium tours. The world knows him as the man who stole the spotlight at the Super Bowl halftime show, the artist who can bring any crowd to their feet with just a few notes. From his early days performing in front of thousands as a child to becoming one of the most influential artists of his time, his story seems like one of perfect success. But here's the truth. That success, the one we all know and admire, almost didn't happen. Beneath the polished exterior, Bruno has lived a life full of hardship, struggle, and secrets that no one knew about. The rumors have swirled for years, each one darker than the last. And now, at 39, Bruno Mars is ready to tell the world the truth. Why now? Why has he decided to speak up, to let go of the image that's kept him in the spotlight for so long? Well, there's much more to his story than just the hits, the fame, and the glamorous life that the public adores. And as much as the world might believe they know Bruno Mars, there's a part of him, his past, his battles, that's remained hidden until now. But behind all that glitz, the story that made Bruno Mars is far darker than you can imagine. Before the fame, before the Grammy Awards and sold-out stadium tours, there was a young boy in Hawaii with big dreams and even bigger obstacles. Bruno Mars, born Peter Jean Hernandez, was thrust into the spotlight before he could even understand what that meant. As a child, he wasn't just playing with toys or learning to read like most kids, he was already performing, impressing crowds and mimicking the moves of Elvis Presley. His family, with their own musical act, saw his potential early on. By the time he was 4, Bruno was performing 2 shows a night, 5 days a week. He was dubbed Little Elvis for his impressive impersonations and soon became the star of the family act. It wasn't unusual for him to perform in front of thousands, even as a toddler. At just 5 years old, he stole the show at the Aloha Bowl halftime, captivating an audience of 40,000 people. By the time he was 6, he was already making TV appearances, performing on the Arsenio Hall show, and even landing a role in the movie Honeymoon in Vegas. But while the world saw a child prodigy on stage, behind the scenes, life was anything but glamorous. When Bruno was 12, everything changed. His parents' divorce rocked the foundation of his once stable world. The family's musical act ended, and suddenly there were no more shows, no more lights, and no more money. Bruno, his father, and his brother found themselves struggling to survive. They didn't have a home to call their own. At times, they slept in a yellow 1993 Cadillac, on rooftops in Waikiki, and even in an abandoned zoo, where the sound of peacocks crying through the night would become the backdrop to their nightly rest. It wasn't just a lack of comfort. There was no electricity, no proper food, and no real security. Despite the challenges, Bruno didn't give up. He earned whatever he could, performing as a Michael Jackson impersonator for $75 a night. He didn't let the hardships crush his spirit, though the weight of them would follow him throughout his life. But it was those years of hardship that planted the seeds for something much bigger and far darker. As Bruno Mars's career started to take off, so did the pressure. He wasn't just a star on stage, he was a star with a past, a childhood full of uncertainty, and a future that seemed full of promise. But there was something else lurking in the background that nobody knew about. While the public saw the smooth performer with a smile that could light up a room, Bruno Mars was battling demons that no one could see. Bruno had always struggled with a sense of control, especially as he grew older and tasted the fame he dreamed of as a child. The demands of his career, the long tours, the expectations of being perfect all the time, these pressures took their toll. And so, like so many before him, he turned to something that helped numb the pain: gambling.
It started out as something small, something he could control, but soon it spiraled into something much darker. What began as a way to unwind between performances became a full-blown addiction. Bruno had a reputation for being a high roller in the casino, but the truth was much darker. He was losing everything, and the stakes kept getting higher. There were times when he gambled away thousands of dollars in a single night, at one point even losing over $17 million in a single sitting at a blackjack table. But it wasn't just the money. His addiction threatened to derail everything he had worked for. The pressures mounted, and his career, his relationships, and his future seemed to hang in the balance. Bruno's gambling wasn't just hurting him financially, it was hurting his career. His behavior started to be noticed, and the industry began to whisper. If the public found out, it could destroy his image. But it wasn't just the gambling that almost destroyed him. It was the isolation, the fear of being found out, and the constant pressure to maintain a perfect facade. But it wasn't just his addiction that merely derailed him. It was something much more personal. Behind every celebrity is a story, and for Bruno Mars, that story wasn't all glitter and fame. While the world saw the superstar, few knew the full extent of the emotional baggage he carried. Bruno's family played a pivotal role in shaping the man he would become. But what many didn't know was that there was a secret buried deep within his family history, one that Bruno carried with him for decades, hidden from the public eye. Bruno's father was a talented percussionist, and his family had a musical act that toured around Hawaii. From the outside, it seemed like they had it all: talent, success, and the tight-knit bond of a family doing what they loved. But in reality, Bruno's home life was far from perfect. His parents' marriage fell apart when he was just 12 years old, leaving him in a world of confusion and emotional turmoil. The sudden end of the family act left Bruno and his family in financial ruin, and they were forced to struggle just to get by. But the real secret lay within his father's past, a secret that would weigh heavily on Bruno as he grew older. Bruno's father, who had always been his hero and his closest companion, had a history of addiction and violent behavior that Bruno could never fully escape. Growing up, Bruno witnessed things no child should ever have to see: moments of rage, emotional abuse, and a tumultuous relationship that would shape his understanding of love and family for years to come. This was a family secret that Bruno didn't want anyone to know, one he carried in silence for decades. Even as he rose to fame, the memory of those painful years haunted him. It was something he pushed aside, burying it deep within himself, thinking that success and the love of his fans would somehow make it all go away. But it didn't. The scars remained, and as Bruno reached the peak of his career, they began to resurface in ways he could no longer ignore. Bruno's most painful secret wasn't something he could hide forever. It was something much closer to home. By the time Bruno Mars had established himself as a global superstar, he had everything most people could only dream of: fame, fortune, and a fan base that adored him. But as he continued to rise, so did the weight of the secrets he kept buried. The gambling issues, the family drama, and the emotional scars from his childhood, these were all things that Bruno had hidden from the public eye. But at 39, something changed. For years, Bruno had been living under the shadow of an image he didn't fully own. His fans saw him as the smooth, charming performer with a perfect life. But inside, Bruno was struggling. The constant pressure of maintaining that flawless public persona was eating him alive. As he stood on stage at the peak of his career, A nagging feeling lingered in the back of his mind. Is this really who I am? What he was facing wasn't just burnout, it was a crisis of identity. He wasn't just a pop star, he was a man trapped in his own success. The image he'd worked so hard to create was becoming a cage. And that's when he made the decision. He had to take control of his own story. It wasn't an easy decision. In fact, it was terrifying. Letting the world see the real Bruno Mars meant revealing parts of himself that he had spent a lifetime hiding. But it also meant that he could finally stop pretending, finally confront the demons that had shaped him, and take ownership of the narrative. For years, he had kept his struggles in the shadows. But now, at 39, Bruno was ready to share his truth with the world. Not just the part that the fans saw, but the part that had been hidden for so long. But what made him decide to break his silence now? The answer lies in the unspoken truth about his career. Bruno Mars is the embodiment of perfection for many, a gifted musician, a perfect performer, and a man who seems to have it all. But behind the scenes, the pressure of living up to that image was suffocating. As he gained fame, he quickly realized that the world didn't just want him to be talented, they wanted him to be perfect. And not just once, but every time he took the stage. From the moment Bruno stepped into the spotlight, he was expected to be a constant source of joy, entertainment, and impeccable performance. Every show, every appearance had to be flawless. Fans expected nothing less than perfection. And for Bruno, that became a heavy burden to carry. The problem wasn't just the expectations of others, it was his own. Bruno was his own toughest critic. He held himself to an impossible standard, never allowing himself to slip, to show weakness, or to be anything less than the flawless pop star that everyone loved. This constant drive for perfection left little room for anything else. It consumed him, and with it came the fear of failure.
There were moments when he wanted to break free, to show the world the real Bruno, the man behind the mic. But that wasn't possible, not without risking everything he had worked so hard for. The idea of showing vulnerability, of revealing his true self to the world, felt like it would tear apart everything he had built. This pressure came at a high cost. It wore him down, affecting not just his mental health, but his relationships and his creativity. Every day, Bruno was faced with the question, what happens if I failed to meet their expectations? And this constant battle between his public image and private struggles began to take a toll. The fear of disappointing his fans and his team weighed heavily on him, keeping him in a cycle of perfectionism that he couldn't escape. But the hardest part wasn't fame. It was the people he had to trust to keep his secrets safe. For years, the world saw Bruno Mars as the man behind the hits, the Grammy-winning artist who could light up any stage with his infectious energy and flawless vocals. But that wasn't the full picture. Behind the hits, the suits, and the smiles, there was a man carrying a weight far heavier than the success he had earned. A man who had been running from his past, from the pain that haunted him. And for a long time, it worked. His music, his persona, everything was carefully constructed to hide what was really going on. But eventually, the cracks started to show. The fame and the applause could only mask the truth for so long. Bruno, at 39, finally realized that if he didn't confront the real him, he'd never be free. He could never truly be happy or at peace until he let go of the image he had so carefully curated. The world had always adored Bruno Mars, who sang about love, gold, and living life to the fullest. But that version of himself wasn't the full story. The real Bruno was a man who had experienced heartache, loss, and deep internal struggle. He was someone who had learned to survive the darkest moments in his life, be it through the pain of his family's dysfunction, the crushing weight of addiction, or the emotional scars left by his past. So he decided to take control of the narrative. For the first time in his life, Bruno Mars was ready to show the world the man behind the music, the man who wasn't perfect, who had faced setbacks, and who had learned, the hard way, that life wasn't always about chasing fame or adoration. It was about healing, understanding yourself, and letting go of the past. By opening up about his struggles, Bruno wasn't just revealing his true self, he was setting himself free. But healing isn't easy when the world keeps watching, waiting for your next mistake. In the public eye, Bruno Mars has always been seen as the charming, confident man who could captivate millions with just a smile. But behind the lights and the music, there was a deeper side of Bruno, one that dealt with the complexities of love and loss. His relationship with Jessica Caban, a model and fashion designer, was one of the most talked-about aspects of his personal life. For years, Bruno kept their relationship low-key, rarely opening up about it in interviews. To the outside world, they seemed inseparable. Jessica always by his side, and Bruno constantly showering her with affection through his music and interviews. But despite the apparent perfection of their love story, there were cracks beneath the surface. Bruno's music, particularly songs like When I Was Your Man, spoke volumes about the pain and heartbreak that stemmed from his relationship with Jessica. Fans speculated for years about the true meaning of the song. Was it about a breakup? Was it about regret? Bruno, however, remained silent on the matter, keeping his feelings and the intricacies of their relationship hidden from the world. The love they shared wasn't easy. It was tested by long hours, the pressure of Bruno's career, and the strain that came from being in the public eye. As Bruno's career soared, their relationship faced challenges that no one could have predicted. The music industry, fame, and the constant scrutiny took its toll on their bond, eventually leading to the dissolution of their relationship. But the heartbreak wasn't just personal. It affected Bruno deeply. His song, When I Was Your Man, wasn't just a hit. It was his emotional release. It was his way of expressing the loss, the regret, and the longing he felt in a way that the public could hear but never truly understand. The love story with Jessica shaped Bruno in ways that went far beyond the headlines. And even as he moved forward in his career, the weight of that love and loss stayed with him. But even in his most vulnerable moments, Bruno's heart held a secret he never shared with anyone.
In early 2024, the rumor mill started to churn, and this time, the story was explosive. Headlines screamed that Bruno Mars, the pop icon with a fortune in the millions, owed a staggering $50 million in gambling debt to MGM Resorts. The number was huge, the claim was sensational, and it quickly gained traction across social media, news outlets, and gossip blogs. It was the kind of scandal that could ruin any artist's career, especially someone with as much public exposure as Bruno. The rumors painted a dramatic picture. A man who'd spent years living the high life, but now trapped by the very vices he once flaunted. People speculated that Bruno's lavish lifestyle, his flashy performances, and his incredible success were all funded by a mountain of debt. The number seemed plausible. High rollers often wagered large amounts in Las Vegas, and if Bruno had a history of heavy gambling, as some claimed, the $50 million could be believable. The media picked up the story and ran with it, adding fuel to the fire, with tales of Bruno's addiction spiraling out of control. The hashtag Bruno Broke exploded across the internet, and for days, the world was consumed by the idea that one of the biggest names in pop music was financially and emotionally falling apart. But the truth was far more complicated. Bruno didn't owe anyone anything. In fact, MGM Resorts, the very company at the center of the rumor, responded publicly, saying there was no truth to the story. They issued a statement to both Forbes and Billboard, firmly denying any debt from Bruno, and reassuring the public that their relationship was based on mutual respect. While the official statement squashed the rumors, the damage was already done. The story had gone viral. The public's perception of Bruno had shifted, and despite the denial, the image of him struggling with debt lingered. What the media didn't know is that Bruno wasn't just fighting for his career. He was fighting for his future. As the dust settled from the gambling rumors, something unexpected happened. Instead of fading away or retreating, Bruno Mars leaned into the chaos. Rather than let the story define him, he turned it into the next chapter of his journey. At 39, he was no longer the young, flawless star that the public had built him up to be. He was now a man who had faced his darkest struggles, his deepest regrets, and was finally ready to write the next part of his story, on his terms. Bruno's response to the rumors wasn't a defensive statement, but rather an embrace of his own truth. In his live shows, he began to incorporate the struggles he had faced in his music, acknowledging the darker moments of his life. He didn't hide from them. He owned them. The man who had once hidden behind the perfect smile and a shiny persona now stood before his fans, unguarded and vulnerable. This openness wasn't just for show. It was a reflection of a deeper transformation. Bruno started to focus less on maintaining a flawless image and more on creating art that resonated with his true self. His music became more personal, more authentic. He wasn't just writing songs for the charts anymore. He was writing songs for himself. His new approach was simple. If the world wanted to know who Bruno Mars really was, they had to see him as a human first, not just a performer. Bruno began to work with new collaborators, taking risks creatively. He explored different genres, pushed the boundaries of his sound, and dug deeper into his own emotions and experiences. He embraced the imperfections in his art, reflecting the imperfections in his life. The risk paid off. His latest work resonated not just with his fans, but with a broader audience, connecting on a level that was deeper than ever before. But this new chapter isn't just about the music. It's about reclaiming his story. For the first time in his life, Bruno Mars is in control of his narrative. He's not just a performer you see on stage. He's the man who's lived through it all. And now he's ready to let the world see who he really is. This is only the beginning. Bruno Mars is about to redefine everything once again.